Welcome to the second part of our reflection on the predicament of the youth today and the duty to be faithful to oneself or the duty to attain well defined, authentic personality in today's context. Youths of the world awake, for your personality is in danger. Part 2. Welcome, Swagatam. Let me begin our reflection in this unit by examining a few instances. Maybe I'll consider two or three human instances and one animal instance. We are familiar with stories like that of Tarzan, stories in which a child gets lost in a forest and develops far away from social influences, develops according to the circumstances, situations, conditions obtained in a forest, and therefore develops in tune with nature. And the consequence is that person attains extraordinary physical skills, abilities, and prowess. Enviable, astonishing, miraculous. So these are the faculties that we have lost by virtue of being domesticated within the social context. Because it's not necessary to develop these skills and powers for living within this kind of protected and provided for environment, and therefore these potentialities go waste or remain untapped, undeveloped. Now consider two historic examples, examples from history. The first example I want to share with you is that of a person who inspires me a lot, Diogenes. Diogenes, who lived at the time of Alexander the Great. Diogenes was a cynic. He belonged to the school of philosophy called the Cynics. Now, Cynics made it a point as part of their philosophical discipline to remain completely unattached to the things of the world, because they believed that any attachment to worldly goods, worldly means and facilities would compromise their freedom. So, in order to perfect their freedom and to maintain it in its purity, it was necessary to develop an attitude of total unattachment. It's something that Lord Buddha advocated, anatta anicca, anicca, non attachment, complete detachment. Every form of attachment is also a form of partial, at least partial imprisonment. The degree of slavery would vary from context to context, but there would be this element of slavery in every form of attachment, including passional attachments, about which I do not want to say much at this point in time. Now, one day, Alexander the Great, as he was on a visit to the city of Corinth, where Diogenes the Cynic lived, was astonished and somewhat offended that everybody who mattered in the city decided to come and have an audience with him, which is considered the greatest privilege in those days. But one prominent face was missing, one important face was missing, and that was the face of Diogenes. So Alexander said, "Where is Diogenes?" The people said, "He is there in the city." A cynic was entitled only to have one piece of cloth to cover himself with, and he didn't have a house. As Jesus would say, Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. So this man lived actually on the side of a very, very poorly kept road near a marketplace. So people said he's there. So Alexander the Great said, "Okay, Diogenes will not come and see us. We will go and see him." So the king set out to visit Diogenes, the great cynic philosopher. And lo and behold, he was lying there on the ground, on without even a mat. He was lying on the ground. So Diogenes felt that there was a movement of the people. So as he lay reclined, he just lifted his head and he saw the great king was, the great emperor was standing next to him. But there was no change of expression on Diogenes' face. So Alexander then said, Diogenes, what is it that I can do for you? What is it that you want me to give you? Absolutely impassively, Diogenes said, step out of my sun. Step out of my sun. He is saying, look, you're standing there, is preventing the rays of the sun from falling on me. As far as I'm concerned, sunlight is far more important than an emperor. My dear friends, true freedom is the freedom to see the sun beyond the emperor. But the way we are conditioned in this world, by our training, by our nurture, the moment we see the face, leave alone an emperor, even of a chota politician, we forget the sun, the moon, the stars, the constellation, and the whole Brahmanda. That's our problem. That's the degree of our unfreedom. Now consider the next example of Jesus Christ. Why did Jesus own nothing? Why did Jesus adopt the kind of various stances and attitudes that he did? For example, in the second chapter of John's Gospel, in the context of the wedding at Cana, when the wine runs out at the wedding feast, his mother comes and tells Jesus they have no wine. And Jesus reacts in a very shocking manner. He says, woman, what is there between you and me? That is to say, family considerations, nepotism will not be allowed to interfere into my sacred ministry, my godly mission. Now, how important a principle it is, no one needs to explain to us in the Afro-Asian context, where family is an important consideration, and as I said in the previous unit, it also serves as a major catalyst for corruption and nepotism in public life. Now, Jesus made sure that no attachment to worldly things and no sense of worldly obligations interfered with, compromised, or corrupted his purest form of commitment to doing the will of God the Father. And therefore, he enjoyed total freedom. If Jesus had Jesus wanted, he could have found a very enviable position within the Jewish establishment, and he would certainly have been the high priest, if you like, and he would have ruled over the religious destiny of all the Jews, not only in Jerusalem, not only in Palestine, but all over the world. But he considered as nothing compared to his personal freedom, and the freedom especially to be authentic and freedom to be totally committed to his spiritual mission. That's the secret of the power of personality. Therefore, you find Jesus being something of an enigma, not something, a furious enigma to everybody around him, even to his disciples. Actually, his disciples themselves were bamboozled, because a person like Peter actually believed that Jesus was the Son of God. And at the same time, he says, look, the Son of Man must be betrayed, he must be crucified, he will be killed, etc. How can one who is a Son of God be killed? That was, as Soren Kierkegaard points out quite rightly, that was something that befuddled Peter. He couldn't make out, he couldn't read this riddle, this puzzle. And maybe this puzzle exasperated even Judas Iscariot. The reason why he betrayed his master or sold his master for 30 pieces of silver, we don't know, because that's not dealt with in detail in the scriptural text. So there is a price to be paid for retaining or attaining and retaining the authenticity of personality. You cannot run after the things of the world. You cannot conform to the patterns, the goals, and expectations of the world and still hope to retain or attain the authentic personality that you are entitled to. Whether or not you should be an authentic personality is a choice that you have to make. But in this world, you get nothing for nothing. There is a price to be paid if you want to be an authentic personality. And that may be the pleasures, the privileges, the perks, the advantages, the gains of the world, all worldly gains. It is for this reason that somebody like Prince Siddhartha renounced his royal pleasures, left his family, his wife and child, one fateful night, and went far away from it to meditate and to come to terms with the destiny of humanity. The rest is history. It was for this reason that the great philosophers of Athens decided to live a life of poverty and celibacy, because they knew that living as everybody else does is incompatible with pursuing this high vocation to be a trailblazer in human thought as philosophers. So there is a price to be paid. And Jesus paid that price. And that price is called crucifixion. Then, as now, my dear friends, society which comprises people who allow themselves to be pressure squeezed into the social mold and therefore live as faded carbon copies of their actual selves, they cannot endure, as Arthur Schopenhauer argues in his essays, pessimistic essays, they cannot endure the presence of a person who is leading an authentic existence being willing to pay the price for it. Because the very proximity of such a person becomes an unbearable symbolic rebuke to the mediocre existence that is others lead by virtue of their having succumbed to this temptation to lead a life of conformity for the mess of pottage that it promised. It's a very serious issue. And this choice every young person has to make sooner or later. And the sooner you make it, the better. Perhaps the most important choice, the most decisive, fateful decision you have to make is not whether or not you will pursue this career or that career. The most momentous decision you have to make in your life is whether you want to be an authentic personality or whether you want to live as a distant, faded carbon copy of your actual potential. What is it that you want to be? What is the priority? What is the shaping goal of your life? You need clarity on this. Now let me introduce the animal that I refer to. My great ambition for a very long time, an ambition that I have not renounced, is to be like a donkey. This might surprise you that I want to be a donkey. Yes, I want to be, I don't say I want to be a donkey, but I want to be like a particular donkey. And perhaps you're familiar with that donkey. When Jesus decided towards the end of his public life, public ministry, to move to Jerusalem, he chose to ride on a donkey. You're all familiar with it. That donkey had a particular eligibility requirement, a particular distinction, a distinction worth noting. That distinction was a donkey on which nobody else had ridden till then. That's something wonderful. We have only two possibilities. Either we are donkeys on whose back anybody can ride, and we are very happy to allow anybody to ride, or we are donkeys set apart for particular purposes. Therefore, when this donkey walked, people were spreading their clothes in front of the donkey so that it could walk on the clothes. And while all of the donkeys were tied to various trees here and there or doing daily chores, this donkey was on a royal march to the capital city, the city of David. That's some difference, isn't it? This difference you can actually choose to have in your own life. Either you can be a donkey ridden by anybody, any Tom, Dick, and Harry, or you can be set apart for the King of Kings to ride to the city of cities. That's a historic journey. This is not an exaggeration, this is the truth of life. You don't have to be a rich person, you don't have to be a powerful person, an influential person, a person holding some terrible office. You can just be an authentic individual. The power of your personality is something extraordinary. In fact, the disciples of Jesus Christ bear very compelling testimony to this. After all, they were very ordinary people, the lowliest and the least in the society. But one good thing is that the Palestinian society of the times were not highly hierarchical. The difference between the rich and the poor, though considerable, was not as appalling as it is today. So the fisher folk had their dignity and their own space in the social ladder, unlike what it is today. But the transformation that those who responded to the call of Jesus Christ experienced, and the amazing and incredible development of their personality, is something that challenges our ability to believe even today. These ordinary folks would have crept their way into their graves but for their encounter, life changing encounter with Jesus, became so transformed and their personality became so powerful and authentic that in the Acts of the Apostles, the popular response to their arrival is, the people who turned the world upside down have come here also. That's what the power of your personality can be. One of the greatest tributes ever paid to me was not paid in the form of a tribute. It was stated as a complaint. Let me give you the context. The context is in Stephen's College. The first moderator of the Church of North India, Bishop Eric Nasir, after his retirement, came and stayed in St. Stephen's College to look after the chapel of the college for a while till I got trained in Bishop's College, Calcutta, when I would take over from him. I had my theological education. I came back, but Bishop Eric Nasser simply did not want to leave. Nor did I want to make it too hot for him that he would want to leave. I treated him kindly. We were always hospitable to him. But one day, when he was talking with my wife, he said, I feel most comfortable with you, but I feel terribly uncomfortable with your husband because there is something about him that I don't understand. There is something about him that I cannot lay my hands on. I felt fulfilled. Not because I enjoyed his discomfiture, but because that was the authentic certification that I was not a doormat to anyone. Unfortunately, far too many Christians believe that politeness is nothing more than being doormats to anybody, especially to religious bigwigs, Thirumenis, bishops, archbishops, cardinals. Pope, of course, is a rare commodity, therefore, I'm not including him in that list. This is not humility, this is not politeness, this is self abnegation, this is self abasement, this is self insult. Respect yourself. Respect yourself. It's a duty that you owe to God. Why? Because God chose to make you in His own image and likeness. You cannot insult that great investment under any circumstance for any purpose whatsoever. So it's very important that we refuse to conform to the patterns set by the society, by the world, even by our home if need be, in order to stay true and faithful to the uniqueness of our personality, because God has need of it. When that donkey which was in Bethany was to be brought and Jesus sent his disciples to fetch the donkey, they asked him, if somebody asks us, why are you taking away the donkey? What shall we say? Jesus said to them, tell them, that the Lord has need of it. The Lord has need of it. God has no need or use for donkeys ridden by everybody. The great thing about this donkey was that it's a donkey that did not want to be a mere donkey. And that is possible. If that is possible for donkeys, surely it should be possible to a far greater extent, in a far more profound manner to us. We have to be something more than what the usual run of humanity today is, which is possible. It is realizing this that Paul writes to Corinthians that he who is in Christ Jesus is a new creation. The old has passed away, the new has come. It is this authenticity of personality that we are duty bound, obliged to make. Now, the important question is a practical question. How are we to maintain this? How are we to resist this mighty pressures that the society continuously exerts on us to conform to its ways? You know, Wordsworth has a lovely poem, Ode on the Intimations of Immortality, where he says, Heaven lies about us in our infancy. Trailing clouds of glory do we come from God who is our home. Heaven lies about us in our infancy. We begin our life like that. But then as we grow, the shades of the prison house grow upon us. Our growth is growth into a prison. And the nature of that imprisonment, the curtailment, the compromising of our freedom, we have examined in the previous unit. Therefore, the contents of that unit do not have to be repeated here. But the question is very relevant and necessary. Is there any way we can resist this otherwise seemingly irresistible pressure that the society exerts us continuously from all sides? We are actually attacked from all sides, as we have already seen. Yes, there is. And in order to introduce that idea, let me borrow a very rudimentary idea from physics: equilibrium. If an object is to be in a state of equilibrium, in a state of kinetic equilibrium, now as against stationary equilibrium, if you have a piece of stone you deposit somewhere, it's in a state of static equilibrium. But something that's moving, for example, the earth revolves around the sun. Now, how does the earth retain that orbit? So, there are two contrary forces acting on it: the centrifugal force, the centripetal force. The centripetal force pulls an object towards the center. The centrifugal force pulls this very same object away from the center. And when the two are equal and opposite, the object upon which they operate, they act, it attains an orbit. It doesn't fall towards one side, it maintains its equilibrium. Now, the problem with us, as we are nurtured in our society, in our homes, and educated through the general system of education, and influenced by public opinion, political ideology, etc., is that all the pressures, all the pulls that act upon us all the time are only in one direction. And therefore, we find it impossible to resist it, and we fall in that direction. And loss of personality involves a loss of equilibrium. Therefore, we are not able to stand upright. We are always like this. Therefore, we need a force that's good enough to serve as a countervailing influence. And looking at Jesus Christ, that countervailing influence is God. So, Jesus was able to resist the pressures and temptations of his time, the pressure to conform, by being identified with God, and therefore he said, I and my Father are one. Doing my Father's will is food and drink for me. I have a baptism to be baptized with. That's baptism in the will of my Father. So that degree of oneness with God is the only guarantee, is the only source of strength or power we have to counterbalance this awesome and almighty pull in the opposite direction. And it's in this sense that I understand the biblical statement, God is our home, God is our refuge. Not in the sense that you can go and hide in God. Surely that cannot be the meaning. God is our home in the sense that He is the source of the strength and the empowerment that we can derive in order to maintain our equilibrium. Being at home, I understand to be being in the state of equilibrium, which enables us to be upright. That's home as far as human beings are concerned. Being wonky, being slanted in one direction, or being on the ground in the opposite direction is not home. It's being ill at home. Being at home as a human being is maintaining one's equilibrium and therefore being upright. And that's possible only if we find our refuge in home. But finding a refuge in home is not a state of passivity, a kind of privilege given to us. It's a dynamic state in which we continually seek and do the will of God. Because as I said, this equilibrium that we need is not static equilibrium, but dynamic equilibrium, and therefore a continuous process is involved here. And that can be safeguarded only if we abide in God. And that's why Jesus said, abide in me and I in you. That's not a one-off experience. It's a continuing, never-ending state of discipline, of being related to, rooted in, and comprehended by the personality of Jesus, which reflects the person of God, or the power of God. That's the only way. Now, of course, you would say, yes, people like Diogenes the cynic maintained his equilibrium. Yes, he did that, but he had that very powerful sense of commitment to his philosophical discipline. It's possible to maintain that kind of, for example, if there is an atheist who is a strong seeker after truth, he may be able to resist some of the pressures that the society exerts on him. No question about it. Because the atheist, the free thinker, pays a price for being what he is. A revolutionary pays the price for it. He may not believe in God, but he believes in something very powerful which is outside of him. We need some source of strength outside of us from which we can derive that centrifugal power, the pull in the opposite direction, which is sometimes referred to also as a counterculture, the culture of the world, the counterculture, the culture of the kingdom, etc. All of these have become stereotypes. The reason why I'm not using these terms, because they have become highly overworn cliches. So it is possible for us to stay faithful to our personality. It is possible for us to stay true to ourselves. And being true to ourselves is the best service we can do to humanity. We become donkeys ridden by any Tom, Dick, and Harry. Then we will be of no use. And unfortunately, most people realize this truth only far too late in life. That's why the German philosopher Hegel said, we are like the owls that open their eyes only after the sun has gone down. Wisdom comes to us too late. That's why we need to regard instances like the life of Jesus, the life of Diogenes, the life of Gautama the Buddha, so on and so forth, so that we can understand the harm that's being done to us by the strategy of blind, unthinking, mechanical conformity to the ways of the world, and the failure, therefore, to understand the larger dimensions of life, and as a result, failing to do justice to the authentic destiny which alone constitutes the secret of our human fulfillment, which is the very purpose of our life. So, this is an issue of utmost significance to young people, and depending on how you face and square out this particular aspect of your life and destiny, the quality of your life, the stature of your personality for the rest of your life till the last moment of your life on planet Earth will be decided. That's the importance of this theme. That's the reason why I thought I would claim your time through two videos to present this theme, which otherwise I would have limited to just one video. So I repeat the title: Youth of the World, Awake! Your personality is in danger. Thank you.